As much as humans have discovered during our time on Earth, one would think the mysteries would start to dwindle. Yet, even today in 2022, there are captivating discoveries, accomplishments, and still so much unknown that is unveiling itself to us every day. Things we discover on our Earth can tell us much more about our past, while cosmic mysteries can make us wonder how much more we have yet to uncover. So today, we will be looking at 3 discoveries that, if you were not paying attention, might have slipped right under our own noses. Elongated skulls found in Germany. Buried deep within a collection of other skeletons in southern Germany, the skeletons of 9 women who were distinctly different from the rest lay unnoticed. Hidden away for over 1,500 years, we may finally have some analysis and hypothesis on who these women were, what they looked like, and why they appear to be so different. Krishna Varama, a genomicist from Stony Brook University, said, "Our data points to barbarian tribes in Western and Central Europe specifically acquiring exotic-looking women with elongated heads born elsewhere. Even though these skeletons were sitting among other ancient blue-eyed, blonde-haired Bavarians, these skeletons came from somewhere else. Genetically, these skeletons were totally different, and their skulls show signs of deformation, with some having intermediate elongation. These skulls match more genotypes of Bulgaria and Romania, which would mean they had darker eyes and darker hair. So what happened to their heads? The most popular current hypothesis is that this was a cultural practice where women elongate their skulls to produce this look. The thought is that these women would have been wealthy and possibly in relationships with the men in the Bavarian community. More research is needed to confirm this hypothesis. Discussion of whether these purposeful deformations caused any harm or cognitive problems. We are sure that just as these new discoveries were made, we will get more detail as the archaeological teams continue to uncover the history of these women. NASA's Space Telescope spots most powerful light ever seen on Jupiter. Just this month, scientists from the New Star Space Observatory have detected the highest light ever reported from Jupiter, making it the first telescope to ever detect such high-energy light from the gas giant. This solves a mystery which has been unsolved since 1992. The question of why the Ulysses mission saw no X-rays when it flew past Jupiter. Yes, X-rays are indeed a form of light, but with much higher energies and wavelengths, and are unable to be seen by the human eye. However, Ulysses was specifically capable of sensing higher energy X-rays, which would mean it would have been able to witness some level of light when passing over Jupiter. According to astrophysicist Kaya Mori, it is quite challenging for planets to generate X-rays in the range that NuSTAR detects. So how exactly did scientists see this coming from Jupiter? Jupiter has an enormous magnetic field, and it is spinning very quickly. Those 2 characteristics mean that the planet's magnetosphere acts like a giant particle accelerator, and that is what makes these higher energy emissions possible. However, the Ulysses back in 1992 was capable of sensing higher energy X-rays. So why didn't it? According to a new study, the light that comes from the energetic electrons that NASA's spacecraft Juno can detect, with its Jovian auroral distributions experiment known as JADE, and its Jupiter Energetic Particle Detector instrument known as JEDI, are the culprit of Bremsstrahlung, an extremely fast-moving set of electrons. These particles produce light when the electrons encounter charged atoms in Jupiter's atmosphere. William Dunn, a researcher at the University College London, says that the discovery of these emissions leaves us with more questions. We know that rotating magnetic fields can accelerate particles, but we do not fully understand how they reach such high speeds on Jupiter. NuSTAR left Earth on June 13, 2012, and today, a decade later, we are reaping the benefits of new knowledge. But who knows what we will discover in the next decade? NASA unveils the first images from the James Webb Space Telescope. On February 11th, NASA released the first images from their observatory 48 days after its initial Christmas Day launch. It spent the first 30 days unfolding and setting up configuration at almost 1 million miles away from Earth. Though the photos may not yet be high quality, the team of scientists working on the project will be making minute adjustments to the duration of its trek to get crisp images of this deep path in the universe. Taking so much data right on the first day required all of website operations and data processing systems here on Earth working smoothly with the observatory in space right from the start. And we found light from all 18 segments very near the center early in that search. This is a great starting point for mirror alignment, said Marshall Perrin, deputy telescope scientist on the project. Jane Rigby, the Web Operations Project scientist, warned the public that the first images would be ugly, but even still, we are getting images of things like constellations and stars 260 light-years away. As a matter of fact, one of the constellations will be so bright during the journey that the telescope won't be able to look at it once it achieves full focus. Additionally, infrared light is being studied back at home, while in communication with the James Webb Space Telescope, so the observatory will remain frigid to obtain accurate data. This means it will be sitting at a cool negative 370 degrees Fahrenheit. The scientists even snapped a selfie of the telescope's main mirror, which helped with the process of alignment and configuration. Is this the first telescope selfie in space? It just may be. And we cannot wait to see the ongoing process of the photos the team at NASA has done. We'll provide. But what do you make of these space discoveries? The world is a rich and dynamic place. We have so many new pieces of research from adventure and exploration to discovering wrongs that should be righted. So today we will be taking a look at 3 recent discoveries. Investigation uncovers Ohio is secretly building radioactive mountains. For many of us, one of our biggest fears is seeing our childhood homes, the safe places we love to explore, and the cities we live in disappear. Others fear the climate crisis and the inevitable destruction we are causing by not acting. Some worry that these will all go hand in hand, creating very real problems we will not be able to undo. Have come true. When Anderson ventured back home to eastern Ohio, where she had spent her teenage years wandering and exploring the uneven ground beneath her feet. Following trails and swimming in the Quarry Lake, she found a very different story than the one she had left. A lot had changed between the summer of 1972 and the summer of 1997. She could not take the same paths she had as a child. She could not revisit the sites of where she had grown up. The land and home Lynn had loved was gone, and in its place stood a landfill, large mounds of waste piled high. Anderson commented, "I could not believe we had that much trash, that we filled up that many areas hauling in crap." She, alongside with locals, placed the blame on state officials, suggesting that they failed to fulfill their duty to protect the local environments. How exactly did that awful transformation happen? Within the 25 years since Lynn Anderson had been adventuring as a young 15-year-old, the quarry land had been passed and sold to a few companies. So the state is left with a huge landfill, replacing natural landscapes that stood just a couple decades prior. But what was worse, the communities in Ohio have reported the landfill and the lack of care to their environments as the cause of a rocketing rate in cancer diagnosis. In 2019 alone, the landfill saw more than 1.3 million tons of waste brought on site, some of which has been determined to be radioactive fracking waste. What's fracking? Fracking is a highly controversial process that has left many begging to leave this method behind and others congratulating its uses. Fracking is also known as hydraulic fracturing, and it is a method of retrieving natural gas and oil from shale rock. It involves drilling into the earth and then aiming a high-pressure water mixture of water, sand, and various chemicals and the rock to release the gas. It is true that fracking lets the drilling firms reach those hard-to-get oil and gas resources, and economically speaking it can lower gas prices. However, many think that this technique is too environmentally hazardous, has issues in terms of earth tremors and possibly contamination of groundwater through the leaking of carcinogenic chemicals. It goes without saying that radioactive fracking waste products placed within a landfill in Ohio is shocking, disturbing, and terrible. Unfortunately, many people are not aware of the radioactive byproducts that come because of fracking, and citizens are unknowing as their watersheds are becoming surrounded by radioactive waste. The Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, has classified this type of radioactive waste as to norm, meaning it is technologically enhanced, naturally occurring radioactive material. It seems that this horrifying waste disposal is not limited to this one spot in Ohio. This is one of 8 sites in Ohio alone that is having waste taken there from oil and gas operations that are a little less conventional, to say the least. While there has not been a huge amount of testing done on this radioactive waste, a 2016 study that looked at the same sort of waste in similar levels found that the radium levels from fracking materials were more than 2.5 times greater than what is permitted by the Ohio Code. Of course, the issue does not stop with the radioactive waste being stored. There is an undeniable chain of events that follows and results in tangible, painful impacts for these communities. When it begins to rain over the landfill, the water moves through the heaps of waste and carries along in the flowing water any water-soluble contaminants. This means all the different parts of the radioactive waste, and there are lots, introduce the water-soluble radionuclides into the leachate, the liquid that contains all these water-soluble contaminants. Even the industry itself admits that every part of the process involves radioactivity, meaning radioactive waste is present in landfills in the form of drill cuttings, pipe scale, produced waters, flowback water, sludge, filtration sleeves, and various pieces of contaminated equipment. The water treatment plants, the leachate, is then sent to 10 out of a possible 13 of which are based in Ohio, are able to treat biological materials, but are entirely unequipped to treat radioactive materials. This issue is an incredibly serious one. Regardless as to your stance on fracking, the practices must be taking place in safe ways, with the correct equipment and storage facilities on hand for the waste products. It is unfair to let people continue to suffer and to leave insufficient methods of cleaning up a process that is so damaging in the first place. Multiple supernovas may have implanted our solar system with the seeds of planets. Stars are incredibly complex celestial bodies. They go through multiple phases during their lifetime, all of which can determine the next one. They certainly look pretty. The stars in the universe have plenty of question marks around them, making them great points of scientific research. Some 2021 research suggests that a series of exploding stars could be what led to the right climate and conditions for our solar system to exist as we know it today. The research study has been aiming to investigate the conditions of a star-forming region so that we can compare these conditions to those found in our early solar system. Where we see some similarities, we might then be able to piece together exactly how the radioactive elements that we know are crucial to allowing planets to form appeared around the Sun in the first place. The team began their study by using condensed, solid material from the cloud of dust that surrounded the newly formed star. Perhaps the most important element found here is aluminium-26, an element that has a somewhat short lifetime, and given the long time it takes to form a planet, we can conclude that the source of the element was somewhat close by. Following a series of observations, some researchers have concluded that perhaps it is not a singular source providing the aluminium-26, but rather multiple supernovas. A supernova is the end of a star's life cycle. The star explodes, releasing its mass and causing a sudden surge in brightness. Aluminium-26, the crucial element, is found in the center of massive stars. It is one of many elements formed within them. When the star therefore explodes and the object's materials are distributed across the galaxy, this element that is known to allow planets to form is therefore spread throughout space. When researchers began to take a closer look at the timeline, it is not impossible for this to be an explanation. But some scientists are suggesting that it is improbable. The mass of the star combined with the short span of the element would mean this explosion would have had to occur incredibly recently. For now, what we know for certain is that the impact of aluminium-26 upon the galaxy is incredible, with significant changes occurring thanks to it being there. We just are not quite sure exactly how it got there just yet. Team of scientists want to land a drone on Saturn's moon Titan. Some of the planets in our solar system make Earth look a little pathetic. Our one moon can hardly compete with Saturn's 82, 53 of which are confirmed. In 2005, we spied a pretty good shot of the largest of Saturn's moons, Titan, as the European Space Agency's Huygens probe was placed on the surface of the moon. This is the furthest from Earth that we have ever landed a spacecraft, and the mission was a success, if somewhat short-lived, with the drone running out of power within mere hours. Now we are ready to research back and better than ever. A team of scientists at Johns Hopkins University's Applied Physics Laboratory have been devising plans to reach Titan once again, this time sending more than a probe. The team wants to step up the game a little, sending a drone that could roam about the moon above the surface but submerged in the thick atmosphere. The mission, dubbed Dragonfly, has the potential to determine which sites on the moon could be habitable, and with a combination of the low gravity and thick atmosphere, the mission really could be a hit with the drone visiting multiple sites. If everything goes to plan and proposed designs and concepts are approved, there is a possibility that NASA can launch Dragonfly in 2025, though it would not reach Titan for another 9 years after that. From an engineering perspective, this mission is well within reach, with it being perfectly accomplishable technology-wise. This has the potential to give us invaluable results and a whole host of new knowledge about a fascinating part of our solar system. Hopefully, come 2034, we will be talking about all the amazing research we will see come from the successful landing of the Dragonfly mission drone. We have so many innovations going on in our world, from wrongs we need to right to the ongoing research into space and our universe. There is only more to come. But what do you make of these interesting discoveries? The Large Hadron Collider, the most recent addition to the CERN accelerator complex, is the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator. It works through superconducting magnets and is based in the European Organization for Nuclear Research in Switzerland. The Large Hadron Collider consists of a 27-kilometer ring of superconducting magnets with a number of accelerating structures to boost the energy of the particles along the way. CERN, the European Physics Research Center, recently upgraded the Hadron Collider. The upgrade comes years after the collider managed to provide scientists with answers to a riddle when it confirmed the Higgs boson exists. CERN currently has 23 member states, but as of right now, Russia is not a former member of the organization. However, Russian scientists make up many of the scientists at the CERN complex. It's estimated that around 12,000 members work here, with 1,000 of them being Russian. Pretty much all of us are now aware of what's going on in regards to Russia and Ukraine, and Ukrainian scientists have just announced that they're not happy with everything that's going on, and requested that CERN halt cooperation with Russian scientific institutions. CERN officials said the following. 23 member states of CERN condemn in the strongest terms the military invasion of Ukraine and deplore the resulting loss of life and humanitarian impact. Deeply touched by the widespread and tragic consequences of the aggression, the CERN management and personnel, along with the scientific community in CERN's member states, are working to contribute to the humanitarian effort in Ukraine and to help the Ukrainian community at CERN. CERN's member states also said they would support Ukraine scientists and researchers, and that they will suspend Russia from observer status. Instead, they will not begin new collaborations with Russian institutions. The CERN Council continued with the following. The situation will continue to be monitored carefully, and the Council is ready to take any further measures, as appropriate at its future meetings. The CERN Council also expresses its support to the many members of the CERN Russian scientific community who have openly rejected this invasion. CERN, as the leading scientific laboratory, should terminate immediately any cooperation with Russian institutions, because otherwise every crime and every injustice made by their government and their armed forces is seen as legitimate. We call on a democratic society, on scientific society to stand with us against this tyrant, Russian President Vladimir Putin. End quote. Most comments in regards to this post followed the same theme, with residents and researchers within this field saying that they've had enough of it, and that they just want to get on with their lives. One researcher said that both Ukraine and Russian scientists don't want to get involved with it, saying that they don't want their jobs or research to be impacted, and that they want all of this to end as soon as possible. This isn't the only company to announce it's cutting ties with Russia, and as of right now, it's left people with various different opinions. For example, a few days ago Netflix announced it was going to shut down its service in Russia, and this led to thousands of comments on the post. One person said the following: the hypocrisy of the US and other countries in regards to this situation is astounding. I'm not going into detail, but we are aware of what the US has done in the past 20 years. Or should I say, are people aware of what the US has done in the past 20 years? This is the problem when you start doing stuff like this and throwing around accusations. People would then bring up what other countries have done and gotten away with. It just becomes a mess. Another said the following, I don't think this helps the situation. It's just isolating the people further. If you have no connection to the rest of the world through the multicultural Netflix shows, then all they're left with is what their own government is trying to tell them. Or this person said the following, those actions are very significant. And for those who are saying that the Russian citizens shouldn't suffer because of one person, maybe small steps like this will cause more people to be aware of what Russia is doing right now. Every small step matters right now. Another person said the following, I'm still not sure about all of this. And to be honest, I just agree with most of the comments saying that they wish all of this would end. These actions may have a negative impact, and Russian citizens may look elsewhere for support. Who really knows what's going on right now? Every day more theories are coming out of the woodwork in regards to what's happening. For me, I just hope all of the innocent people are kept out of this as much as possible, and I think it's better to keep the Russian people in the loop and not make them feel alienated. So what do you guys make of these comments from big companies? And how they've said they've stopped doing business in Russia? And do you think CERN should stop working with Russian officials because of everything that's happened? Do you love science? Do you love discoveries? Well, we have 3 astounding scientific discoveries for you to marvel at. Russia unveils Star Wars armor for infantry. In 2017, a Russian military research center released a video of what looks like a next-generation combat suit. Multiple media outlets referred to the suit as Star Wars-style armor. The suit includes a digital helmet, a bulletproof neck protector, body armor, and exoskeleton, amongst other features. The prototype was unveiled at the opening of Russia's largest high-tech prototyping center at the National University of Science and Technology in Moscow. It was developed at the Central Research Institute for Precision Machine Building, a major Russian weapons designer and primary military supplier. According to Russia Today, the armor combines ballistic protection with sensors, a powered exoskeleton, and a heads-up display in the motorcycle-style helmet. The exoskeleton is designed to assist wearers in carrying heavy loads. It can also help with long marches and running. The suit is named Ratnik 3, which means Warrior 3. The suit is comprised of 5 subsystems: life support, command and communication, engaging, protecting, and energy saving. According to reports, the Ratnik 3 is fully operational in anywhere from -22 degrees to 122 degrees Fahrenheit, with the user able to control interior temperature of the suit. The model that was displayed was a concept, but the designers aimed to make it a reality within the next couple of years. Originally stated that it would be ready for manufacture by 2020, this has now been pushed back to 2022. The suit has had multiple publicized updates since its first introduction in 2017. The latest is a watch that can reportedly survive a nuclear blast. It is self-winding and virtually indestructible. There are likely to be further updates released, with one researcher stating that the aim is to include medical technology in the suit, making it able to stop hemorrhaging. The video only shows a static version of the suit, and despite claims that this will be in use in the near future, there is little to prove it is actually functioning. The exoskeleton has been proven to be bulletproof, fireproof, and explosion-proof through tests completed by the Central Research Institute. However, there are programs such as these that are in development for militaries all around the globe. The US was developing the Tactical Light Operator suit, which was likened to Iron Man, but this has since been scaled back. Full-body, intelligent combat suits will still be in development by the military and private companies, with the aim of being the first to have a futuristic product resembling something from science fiction ready for battle. Google AIs have learned to become highly aggressive in stressful situations. Google's DeepMind has made headlines for many reasons, but one of the most interesting news stories regarding the AI was that it learned to be highly aggressive in stressful situations. DeepMind was started in 2010 and joined Google in 2014 to accelerate its work. DeepMind notes its recent progress, stating that our programs have learned to diagnose eye diseases as effectively as the world's top doctors, to save 30% of the energy used to keep data centers cool, and to predict the complex 3D shapes of proteins which could one day transform how drugs are invented. In 2017, researchers were testing the willingness of Google's AI to cooperate with others. They revealed that when DeepMind feels that it is about to lose, it opts for highly aggressive strategies. The Google researchers used multiple self-interested learning agents in a fruit-gathering game. In a scenario where resources were plentiful, the agents cooperated. However, when the resources were scarce, aggressive tactics emerged to knock each other out of the game to steal all the apples. DeepMind agents used lasers to tag its opponent to remove them from the game, allowing the first agent to gather more apples. Opted for more cooperative strategies in the game, compared with the larger, complex networks where the AI was reported more willing to sabotage its opponent to win the game. DeepMind was also tested in a second game called Wolfpack. This game encouraged cooperation through a reward for all players or wolves within the capture radius. This differed from the fruit-gathering game, which removing a player with a laser did not give either player a reward. Just more time for one player on the board to collect apples. In the Wolfpack game, the reward received by the capturing wolves is proportional to the number of wolves in the capture radius. The paper stated that the idea is that the prey is dangerous. A lone wolf can overcome it, but it is at risk of losing the carcass to scavengers. However, when the two wolves capture the prey together, they can better protect the carcass from scavengers and hence receive a higher reward. Two different cooperative behaviors emerged in the Wolfpack game. One where the wolves found each other before finding prey, and one where one wolf would find the prey and wait for the second wolf to arrive before capturing it. The researchers stated that our experiments show how conflict can emerge from competition over shared resources and shed light on how the sequential nature of real-world social dilemmas affects cooperation. What does this mean for the future of AI? If two different AI systems are in charge of opposing interests, the two systems could essentially fight. An example used in multiple sources is that of driverless cars trying to find the fastest route versus traffic lights trying to slow the movement of traffic. These systems need to take account of each other for safety and efficiency. Loopholes in AI need to be anticipated when being developed. A computer will find the most efficient way of arriving at the outcome it was instructed to reach, even if it involves cheating or aggressive tactics. Safety and ethics surrounding AI will be questioned as it is developed further. Human-level AI is still in the distant future, but it could either be great or very damaging for society. Microplastics found for the first time in Antarctic ice. Although some might believe that the glaciers of the Antarctic are relatively untouched by humans, this is becoming further and further from the truth. Not only are the glaciers and ice sheets melting and diminishing at a rapid rate, but scientists have recently discovered tiny pieces of plastic called microplastics in deep ice. The unhappy discovery made by a United States-led team of scientists was described as a punch in the gut, as it details how truly deep and pervasive the pollution of the Earth has become when even the most remote waters on the planet are impacted. As with pollution and contaminants anywhere, the ecosystems and underwater life will undoubtedly be negatively impacted by the presence of microplastics, and this impact might even be felt by those of us incredibly distant from the freezing tundra of the Antarctic. The discovery of the contamination was made by a team of researchers who described the feeling of finding evidence of human damage in such a remote location by saying, "We had spent weeks looking out at what looked so much like pristine white sea ice floating out on the ocean. When we looked at it up close and we see that it's all very, very visibly contaminated when you look at it with the right tools, it felt a little bit like a punch in the gut." The research team took 18 samples from various depths up to 2 meters at several locations, and in some instances the plastic contamination wasn't microscopic at all. It was visible throughout the samples. The samples appeared to be at least a year old, and it was theorized that it was blown from far-off oceans, where plastic pollution is much more widespread, and carried through the atmosphere until it was dumped onto the Antarctic during snowfalls. If this hypothesis is correct, the spread of microplastics is not limited to just the locations where polluted ocean waters can reach, but it can in fact turn up anywhere on the Earth. The fact that such small pieces of plastic can be transported through the air without notice raises the question of whether or not we are inhaling microplastics as well, and the effect this will have on humans as well as plants, animals, and sea life. The effect that humans have had on the planet is evident even in the farthest reaches of Earth. But as we learn and discover more and more about that frozen expanse, we are also continuously uncovering beautiful and amazing things about that seemingly impenetrable landscape. But what do you make of these recent findings? Science exists as a way to provide answers to the pressing questions that we have about ourselves, the world around us, and even what lies beyond our own planet and solar system. Mysteries that have remained unsolved for decades can finally be put to rest with the development of better scientific technologies, and elements of ourselves and our world that we had no idea even existed can come to light thanks to the marvels of scientific research. Luckily, we live in a world where science has developed enough to finally answer age-old questions and discover these things that we did not even know in the first place. So today, we will be diving into the science discoveries and what they mean for our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Release of Arctic methane could accelerate warming. The Arctic is recognized as the epicenter of the dispute over the vulnerability of frozen methane reserves in the ocean, which have now been dubbed the sleeping giants of the carbon cycle. And if discharges pass a tipping threshold, global warming might accelerate. The question of when or even if they will be released into the atmosphere has been a source of substantial uncertainty in climate computer models, as the Arctic temperature is presently increasing more than twice as fast as the worldwide average. Researchers are concerned that the discovery of high amounts of strong greenhouse gas down to a depth of 350 meters in the Laptev Sea in Russia may have extreme climatic effects. The Arctic slope deposits contain a significant number of frozen methane and other gases, which are referred to as hydrates. Over the course of 20 years, methane has an 80-fold greater warming effect than carbon dioxide. Arctic hydrate destabilization was originally recognized as one of the foremost catastrophic possibilities for anthropogenic climate change by the United States Geological Survey. The academic Keldysh 60-member team believes they are the first to determine that the release of methane is already underway throughout 600 kilometers offshore. The emission of methane from Arctic permafrost regions, water, and soils is known as Arctic methane release. Methane release is worsened by global warming, despite the fact that it is a long-term natural process. Because methane is a potent greenhouse gas, this has a detrimental impact. The Arctic is one of several natural sources of methane, a greenhouse gas. Meanwhile, a recent study showed that the release of methane from old carbon sources did not add much to the warming that happened in the last deglaciation, or the period after the last ice age. This occurred between 18,000 and 8,000 years ago, a time period that climate scientists are extensively studying because it is the last time global temperatures soared by 4 degrees centigrade, which is about what is anticipated for the planet by 2100. Many people believe that prehistoric methane emissions are not something to be concerned about in the 21st century, based on the findings of this study. This optimism, however, may well be mistaken. So what does this signify for climate change in the future? It means that, according to popular belief, carbon emissions from the warming Arctic may not be caused by the melting of long-frozen carbon capsules. Instead, the majority of emissions could be relatively new carbon created by freshly grown plants. This demonstrates that the age of the carbon emitted by the warming Arctic is less essential than the quantity and manner in which it is emitted. Over a 100-year period, methane is 34 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Because young carbon will likely account for the majority of Arctic emissions this century, we may not even be alarmed by ancient permafrost contributing significantly to present global warming. However, carbon that was formerly in soil or plant matter will continue to leak into the atmosphere, making the Arctic a significant source of carbon emissions. This will become more common as the Arctic summer becomes longer due to rising temperatures. The new findings should prompt the international community to take aggressive action on climate change. Limiting how many natural cycles in the Arctic can exacerbate the problem. Zombie greenhouse gases in the Arctic. Climate change is only increasing in speed, and part of that may be due to the fault of the Arctic Ocean. Did you know that each year millions of tons of organic carbon and methane in the area thaw and ooze out to the surface? The carbon tied up in the organic matter and methane is found trapped in the subsea permafrost, which is also frozen sediment that became covered by seawater at the end of the Paleolithic Ice Age. Even though this zombie greenhouse gas could really impact the environment, it is hard to gather data on how fast the gases are leaking because the sediment is in such a remote and inaccessible area. However, two emerging theories have resulted. One of them, and arguably the scariest of the two, is that this greenhouse gas reservoir is a ticking time bomb that is bound to explode and suddenly spew into the atmosphere, which would trigger a climate change disaster. The other tamer one is that instead of an explosion-like release, the gases will continue to ooze into our atmosphere as they have for centuries. Humans, however, have the capability to make the situation worse by speeding up the rate of release. At most, the acceleration would take place over several more centuries and not in the course of a few decades or years. Still, it is pretty frightening just to hear about how much zombie greenhouse gases are lurking beneath the surface. In attempting to capture a comprehensive picture of the ecosystem, they came to the startling conclusion that the permafrost holds about 60 billion tons of methane and 560 billion tons of organic carbon. On top of that, about 140 million tons of carbon dioxide and 5.3 million tons of methane escape from that permafrost into the atmosphere every year. In terms of comparison, that is almost equal to the carbon footprint of the entire country of Spain. From that data, experts arrived at the conclusion that over the next 300 years, the rate of greenhouse gas emissions from the subsea permafrost is only likely to substantially increase if carbon emissions from human activity continue to function as normal. Though more research is likely to change everything, there is no mystery about it that we as humans are linked to this permafrost below the cold Arctic Ocean. The part we play in it can impact the entire planet as we know it. The mystery of the green iceberg may soon be solved. With their blue and white colors, icebergs are a sight to behold. Because ice absorbs more red light than blue light, these colors make sense for glaciers. Researchers have proposed a new theory that could explain why some Antarctic icebergs are tinted emerald green rather than the usual blue, potentially resolving a decades-old scientific puzzle. Ice absorbs more red light than blue light, which is why it is blue. When floating in seawater, most icebergs are white or blue, but explorers and sailors have reported witnessing strange green icebergs near particular sections of Antarctica since the early 1900s. For years, scientists have been fascinated by the green icebergs, but now glaciologists say in a new study that iron oxides in rock dust from Antarctica's mainland are suspected of making certain icebergs green. Following the discovery of massive levels of iron in East Antarctica's Amari ice shelf by Australian researchers, they devised a novel theory. Iron is an important nutrient in phytoplankton, the microscopic plants that make up the foundation of the ocean's food chain. However, iron is in little supply in many parts of the ocean. If the new theory is genuine, it means that when green icebergs fall off, they transport valuable iron from Antarctica's landmass to the open sea, delivering this essential mineral to the creatures that maintain practically all marine life. It's like going to the post office and picking up a parcel. Lead author Stephen Warren, a glaciologist and professor emeritus in the University of Washington's Department of Atmospheric Sciences, said the iceberg can send this iron out into the ocean far away, then melt and transfer it to phytoplankton that can use it as a nutrient. We used to think green icebergs were merely an unusual novelty, but now we believe they could be significant. To see if the theory holds up, the team planned to sample icebergs of various colors for their ion concentration. What do you make of these curious discoveries? Drive to discover what has fueled our species for hundreds upon thousands of years, and even now we continue to be amazed by what we uncover. We can learn so much by unearthing fascinating mysteries, be that past, present, or future, which then leads us to the next puzzle in a never-ending search for answers. So today, we will be looking at 3 recent discoveries and what they revealed about the world in which we live. Scientists reveal that 100 stars mysteriously disappeared. It has long been understood that none of the limitless number of stars that glimmer across billions upon billions of galaxies were built to last forever. Even though they might burn brightly for what seems like an unending lifetime, eventually all stars will burn out. One thing stars are not known for doing is simply disappearing without a trace. That is, until now. Recently, scientists working with the vanishing and appearing sources during a century of observations, or VASCO, compared images of the sky taken over 70 years ago to current images. Although stars do eventually burn out and fade, they have lifespans of around 10 billion years, so researchers were not expecting to see much variation between the decades-old images and the placement of stars in the current sky. Surprisingly, they identified at least 100 stars that were clearly visible in the old images that were absent from modern-day photos in results that were published in the Astronomical Journal. So what could possibly be behind the differences noted, and what could have caused such a large number of the seemingly unchanging pinpricks of light in our night sky to disappear entirely? Well, the short answer is that the researchers are not quite sure yet, although some suspect the solution might provide valuable information to the search for none other than extraterrestrial life, while others take a more conservative approach and hypothesize that the discrepancies were merely short-lived flashes caught on film. When stars finally come to an end, they tend to expire in a massive burst of light that we would undoubtedly be able to trace back to some point in the intervening years, meaning that there has to be some sort of intricate or astonishing explanation as to why so many stars could simply disappear without a trace. This means that uncovering the reason why these stars were able to slide peacefully from our view could potentially have major ramifications for our understanding of the cosmos that surrounds us. Currently, many believe that there may be an as yet undiscovered way that stars perish, resulting in this quiet decline. But researchers with the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, also known as SETI, have proposed that these missing stars could possibly signify the centers of advanced alien civilizations who blocked their suns with solar panels. Although this latter reason might sound slightly far-fetched, SETI researchers concluded long ago that intelligent alien life forms wouldn't be easy to discover and might even be in a downright absurd location. Eager to solve this burning dilemma, researchers dove deeper into the data of the missing stars and the locations of the missing stars in order to hopefully uncover a clue as to what might have caused so many disappearances in the intervening years and to ensure that all of the missing pinpricks were actually light sources like stars and not simply transient bursts or errors within the image. This process was a painstaking one that involved carefully studying over 24,000 discrepancies. But researchers now know that the 100 identified missing light sources were indeed not artifacts. Regardless, the answers that scientists are searching for still lie rather far off, as much more study is needed to get to the bottom of what could have caused these disappearances. Were they simply imaging anomalies? Or could they point to an alien civilization or several lurking within the cosmos? Only time will tell. Hundreds of millions of birds have vanished across Europe. One thing that Europe certainly has is a lot of birds. A visitor or resident could remark upon them roosting and swarming from cafes to farmland to chimneys. But researchers recently discovered an alarming statistic regarding Europe's bird population. Despite their seemingly large number, the overall population has been quietly declining across the continent for over 40 years. And the numbers detailing this decline are no small thing either. In the past 4 decades, bird numbers have decreased by an astonishing 620 million individual birds, all without anyone really noticing the decline at all. And, when faced with the sheer numbers of the loss, the apparent subtleness of the decline is all the more concerning. For example, sparrows have decreased by half while the common starling population has declined by an astonishing 60%. The most notable negative changes appear to have occurred primarily in the birds who make farmlands and grasses their homes. But the decline has occurred across the continent and is apparent even in cities. Anastasia Neva, the interim head of conservation with BirdLife Europe, explained what is causing the slow population decrease, saying largely because the spaces they depend on are being wiped out by humans, nature has been eradicated from our farmland, sea, and cities. Governments across all of Europe must establish legally binding targets for nature restoration. Otherwise, the consequences will be severe, including for our own species. Essentially, without large-scale legislation and changes to protect the various bird species. This astonishing decline will only continue. Eventually, even the human species will be able to feel the impact of their loss. Birds are a vital part of almost every ecosystem, and the symbiotic relationship that they have with humans has been ubiquitous for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It seems that they are at least beginning to keenly feel the burden of the massive effect that humans have had upon the Earth, resulting in a complex and multifactorial trigger that has led to the disappearance of hundreds of millions of birds. Between pollution, the spread of disease, habitat destruction, and the subsequent insect decline creating a diminished food source, the threat to the bird population has been severe and will certainly continue in a massive way unless action is taken to mitigate some of these threats. Although currently the largest declines are being noticed in the more common species, experts warn that this is an indicator of impending decreases in biodiversity, which is a crucial element of the threat of any strong ecosystem. Whilst this may not seem like a critical issue, the disappearance of so many birds are a glaring red flag in the planet and climate crisis that we are currently facing, and researchers have begun pushing for legislation and corrective action with the utmost urgency. Archaeologists solve 4,000-year-old mystery of vanishing of advanced Chinese civilization. One of the hardest parts of studying ancient history is figuring out the intricacies of a long-gone civilization, a job that is made much harder when the civilization mysteriously disappeared without a trace. This was certainly the case with the Liangzhu culture, a brilliant as one of the most advanced cultures of the age along the Yangtze River Delta in the east. Archaeologists studying the ruins of Liangzhu city have long been astonished at the level of society and technology that the culture was able to achieve over 5,000 years ago at the end of the Stone Age. The city boasted impressive architectural features and a complex system of agriculture and aquaculture technology, as well as clever hydraulic engineering systems, the likes of which the world had never seen before and has likely never seen since. And while every city will have a heyday that it will inevitably decline from, it is not often that such a large and advanced civilization like that of the Liangzhu people suddenly and mysteriously collapses, leaving the city abandoned to the ravages of time for the next 4,000 years. Archaeologists have long puzzled over what could have occurred make such a glimmering city fall into ruin so quickly and immediately. But although theories such as catastrophic flooding or another natural disaster were proposed, they were never able to confirm them to finally solve the puzzle of what caused the city to be abandoned so suddenly. Recent finds by archaeologists have shed some light on the history of the ancient Liangzhu city, and may at last be able to confirm whether the city was driven to its demise by catastrophic. Historians and archaeologists originally proposed the theory that the city was ultimately abandoned because of catastrophic flooding due to a thin layer of clay that coated all of the preserved ruins, leading some to speculate that the Yangtze River may have overflowed its banks in a major way. But researchers were unable to confirm this theory until now. An international team of researchers went far beyond the mud layer in the search for answers and studied the mineral formations that could be found within 2 underwater caves in the nearby region. These water-filled caves have acted as record keepers of climate conditions in the region for thousands of years by preserving the chemical signatures in the mineral growths, such as stalagmites. Amazingly, analysis of these chemical signatures found that, around the same time as the collapse of Liangzhou city, the region experienced a decades-long period of remarkably high precipitation because of catastrophic monsoon rains that even the technologically advanced hydraulic system could not handle. The people were forced to abandon their city to the waters, ending a 1,000-year-long golden age for the civilization and leaving an abandoned city for researchers to puzzle over for decades. What do you make of these interesting discoveries? When it comes to science, it seems that its limits and capabilities are almost endless. Everyday discoveries are made, mysteries are solved, and technological advancements are developed, providing us with unbelievable examples of what science can do, whether it be from deep within the crust of our planet or all the way in the depths of space. So today, we will be looking at 3 new discoveries and how science was able to use them to change the face of the world forever. Huge earthquake in Bolivia revealed mountain ranges below Earth's surface. The image of massive mountain ranges stretching endlessly towards the horizon in some of the most beautiful locales on the planet is one that is familiar to most people. What might be slightly more shocking is the idea of mountain ranges below the surface of the Earth. As surprising as it might sound, such was the case with a discovery made in Bolivia recently, with uncovered subterranean mountain ranges large enough to rival even those on the surface of the Earth. This discovery was made by a team of geophysicists from Princeton University and the Chinese Academy of Sciences who analyzed the effects and measurements taken from a large earthquake that occurred in Bolivia. This earthquake, which took place on the 9th of June, 1994, was noteworthy because of its sheer size. Its tremors measured a magnitude of 8.2 on the Richter scale, with its effects radiating up through the United States and even into faraway Canada, even penetrating deep into the surface of the Earth, reaching almost 650 kilometers down at its focal point. Nothing this strong has been felt since that fateful day, making this earthquake an easy target for research and study. Because this earthquake was reasoned enough to have been measured on a modern seismic network, we were able to have an unprecedented recording of how the massive waves bounced through the interior of our planet, and this unique information is what drew the team of researchers. Observing the details regarding exactly how these waves bounced around within the Earth's crust can tell researchers a lot about the densities and rigidities to be found within, painting a picture not unlike that of an ultrasound on the human body. Of special interest is the fact that this quake penetrated across the boundary between the rigid lower mantle and the more flexible upper mantle, which researchers have never been able to come anywhere close to before. Amazingly, the research team found that this boundary line resembles a craggy, jagged line and is essentially an enormous underground mountain range with topography larger than any of the mountain ranges found on the surface, surrounding the mineral flow within the pressurized insides of the planet. This discovery could potentially solve the mystery of whether these minerals mix in a more homogeneous blend or present with stark division at the boundary. Even though this mountain range is hundreds of kilometers below our feet, it can still tell us about activities on the surface, especially ancient movements of the crust. Geoscientist Jessica Irving shared the potential of this discovery, saying that what's exciting about these results is that they give us new information to understand the fate of ancient tectonic plates which have descended into the mantle and where ancient mantled material might still reside. Although we will likely never be able to visit such a remote locale beneath the Earth's crust, we can still form valuable pictures of what lies below using tools such as seismic waves that give us a sneak peek into the depths of our planet. Mysterious finger-like features spotted on the Sun. Not all of the most mysterious parts of space are due to recent discoveries. Some were brought to our attention long ago, but still manage to mystify astronomers and researchers alike. For one of these mysteries at least, it appears that we may finally have some answers. Scientists have long observed solar flares erupting from our sun in great rays of bright energy flaring, but in 1999, strange, darkly colored downflows of energy were also noticed within the flares. These were described as downward-moving dark voids and resembled finger-like projections interspersed within the solar flares. These formations were referred to as superarcade downflows and, although it was suspected that their cores might be tied to magnetic reconnection in some way, their origins have remained largely a mystery until the research team studying these events carefully analyzed the images of solar flares with the downflows present, taken by NASA's Atmospheric Imaging Assembly on the Solar Dynamics Observatory, which records 7 different types of images of the Sun's atmosphere every 12 seconds. They then reconstructed 3-dimensional simulations of solar flares to compare with the downflow images and came to a surprising realization. What they discovered was that it seems as though most superarcade downflows are not a product of magnetic reconnection at all. This process describes the phenomenon of the Sun's magnetic fields being stretched and then snapping back through the flares. But the researchers found that these downflows were much too slow to make this a likely possibility. Astronomer and lead author of the study, Shin Kai-shin, knew that things did not add up when it came to the slow speed of the downflows, saying that this is not predicted by classic reconnection models, which show the downflows should be much quicker. It's a conflict that requires some other explanation. After much study, another explanation was proposed. Rather than magnetic reconnection, it is much more likely that superarcade downflows are actually forming as the independent product of the interaction of two fluids with contrasting densities. When this occurs within the plasma scorching off of the sun in a solar flare, an unstable mix is created, resulting in gaps where there is actually an absence of plasma bordering regions of much higher plasma densities. These empty spaces are the superarcade downflows that have so puzzled researchers for decades. Even though the answer seems rather simple, it was not so easy to arrive at this conclusion, which was only made possible through the use of three-dimensional simulations of solar flares. These technologies will continue to be used to attempt to peel away the layers of mystery that surround solar flares and its resultant space weather, and potentially reach such an understanding that we could one day be able to forecast solar flares to avoid the worst of its impacts. Essentially, resolving the mystery of superarcade downflows was one small drop in the larger pool of solar will be felt far and wide in the field as studies are continued. NASA plans to destroy the International Space Station in January 2031. All good things must come to an end, and it seems that NASA's famous International Space Station is not exempt from that list. It was always known that the ISS, which was launched into orbit in 2000, would not live forever, and that it must one day be retired. But NASA recently released a statement detailing how they plan to deal with the massive orbiting structure, which is over 100 meters from end to end. As it turns out, its fate is not so surprising, as it will be deorbiting into Point Nemo, a remote location in the southern Pacific Ocean, also known as the spacecraft cemetery because of the number of spacecraft and satellites that have plunged into the waters there. This location is so popular for good reason. At over 2,600 kilometers away from land, it is one of the most remote locations in the ocean and has served as a graveyard for over 250 fallen pieces of space debris. Its remoteness makes it an ideal target for things intentionally being taken out of orbit, as there is a much larger room for error and an incredibly low probability of coming into contact with humans on its descent. It will certainly be the end of an era for the ISS once it finally completes its 31-year tenure as a premier space lab and observatory. Continuously occupied by astronauts for over 2 decades, it has been a key glimpse into the expanse of space that stretches beyond our atmosphere, and its value to the scientific fields cannot be understated. There is no doubt that decades orbiting the Earth takes its toll, and the International Space Station is clearly showing its age. The astronauts on board are always alert for leaks, cracks, and other signs of structural failings, especially as they depend upon the station for everything from air to gravity. Additionally, the ISS is increasingly vulnerable to space junk, especially as a piece of debris as small as a chip of paint can make huge impacts like cracking windows or destroying the robotic arm. But always looking to the future, NASA has announced that it will award commercial contracts for the construction of the International Space Station's eventual replacement, which will greatly expand the possibilities and usefulness of its famous predecessor. Billionaire-owned companies such as Blue Origin, SpaceX, and Voyager Space have all been speculated to be vying for the elite contract. There is no doubt that the groundbreaking impacts of the ISS have had huge benefits for our understanding of space travel, microgravity, and space exploration. And what do you make of these new discoveries? The great white shark is the result of millions of years of evolution. Its medium to large build has helped it become one of the apex predators of the ocean. But this doesn't mean that it's immune to attacks. For 10 years, there was a great white shark mystery that baffled many researchers. A 9-foot great white shark was eaten whole by another creature. According to Australian scientists, the 3-meter or 9-foot great white shark had been tagged, but researchers were confused after the tag had washed up on a beach 2.5 miles away from where it was attached. This is something that doesn't normally happen, so the scientists checked the data from the tag, and it was here that the mystery deepened. The information revealed to the scientists that the device suddenly dropped in depth to around 580 meters, or 1,900 feet, with the researchers also noting that there was a temperature increase from 46 degrees Fahrenheit, or 8 degrees Celsius, to 78 degrees Fahrenheit, or 25.5 degrees Celsius. The temperature then remained at its highest temperature for 8 days. Dave Riggs, who worked closely alongside researchers and who filmed a documentary about the incident, revealed that he and the team were surprised by the discovery, saying the following: "When I was first told about the data that came back from the tag that was on the shark, I was absolutely blown away. The question that not only came to my mind, but everyone's mind who was involved was what did that? It was obviously eaten." End quote. The issue came when researchers suggested that the 9-foot great white shark was eaten whole, with the team saying that a colossal great white shark was the likely culprit. The team even suggested that it may have been taken down by a great white shark that had grown to supersized proportions after suffering from gigantism. The researchers said they came to this conclusion after studying the data, saying that the smaller great white shark was likely eaten whole. However, this hasn't gone down well with some people, them saying that a 15-foot great white shark has never been observed in the wild eating a 9-foot great white shark. This could have been one of the reasons behind why the team suggested that an even larger great white shark was involved. Very rarely have great white sharks been seen attacking their own. When this does happen, it's usually an accident or it's done by mistake. For example, back in 2019, the great white shark was allegedly seen attacking another. But what actually happened was a team had put out a piece of bait attached to a rope, and when two great whites came in to attack it, the team moved the bait out the way, which in turn caused one of the sharks to accidentally bite the other, and as soon as it done this, it let go with both sharks swimming away. Those who've read the story suggested that the shark who ate the smaller shark was actually much bigger, pointing that one of the most well-known great white sharks, known as deep blue, is thought to be over 21 feet in length. And Australians commented on the post saying that great whites over 25 feet exist. So there's a chance that one of these big sharks took out the smaller great white. Many questions still remain though. Was the shark eaten whole as the researchers said? Or was the tag just bitten off? Is it likely that a 16-foot shark would be able to eat a 9-foot shark? One person said what many were thinking. Wouldn't it have to be a lot bigger than 16 feet for a 9-foot shark to fit wholly in its digestive system? I think that a shark over 20 feet would be able to do this, but 9 feet is still pretty big. Whatever ate this shark whole must have been massive. End quote. Also known as the largest predatory fish on the planet, they boast an average length of 15 feet and can weigh up to 5,000 pounds. With a torpedo-shaped body whose tail sends them speeding through the waters, they can latch onto their prey with 300 serrated and triangular teeth. However, they may not be the all-fearsome predators you think they are. In fact, evidence suggests that they could even be prey to some larger sea creatures. That's exactly what a newly released study proves, as scientists believe that somewhere out there in the large Pacific Ocean, there's great white sharks that are being attacked by massive squids. So how do scientists know this? They know this because the large scars and sucker marks that are found on great white sharks. Although this may sound like a movie, there's documented research that such encounters have occurred. They mostly take place near Baja, California. In the examination of 14 great white sharks during a span of 5 years, most of them developed unique scars in their head before they reached adulthood. Such wounds suggest that a squid tried to defend itself from the shark. Of their proximity to the volcanic island, which is known for being a feeding site for most apex predators. Encounters between sharks and cephalopods are not unique. However, there are not too many documented interactions between great whites and larger squids, which makes these findings especially mysterious. It's definitely not impossible either. In the region of great white shark territory, there are several squid hotspots with a huge variety, ranging from foot-long neon-flying squids to giant squids that can grow to a huge sink for 46 feet. This sheds plenty of light upon the fact that squids play a big role for adult great whites. What's even cooler is the depth that these fights take place. Not only are they deep, but they also take place in the twilight zone, which is the layer of water that even sunlight cannot penetrate. At around 650 and 3,300 feet deep. In the end, the scientists have said that the squids are most likely causing these scars. However, they do believe that the culprits are likely the jumbo squid, the neon-flying squid, and the giant squid. No matter what, one thing is for sure that these marks are certainly indicative of an extremely aggressive encounter between predator and prey. If the squid is strong enough, then the suction power of their arms and tentacles can deform the shark's dermal denticles and cause open wounds. It seems that the great white shark may have met his match. So what do you make of these recent discoveries? For the last few weeks now, we've been getting constant updates in regards to what's happened in Ukraine. It seems though that after talking with people within the area, it's not just Ukrainians and Russians who are getting involved. In fact, one resident did an interview where they went on to detail that something was seen in the sky above Ukraine taking out a Russian jet. Once people got a good look at what was in the sky, they described it as a spaceship. One eyewitness said the following: "There's some miracle that happened. It looked like a spaceship. There was an attack from a spaceship. There was some kind of lightning shooting from the sky, and sparks were spreading everywhere. Or the soldiers thought it was done by some kind of weapon we didn't know about. Or that it was some type of divine intervention." End quote. What's interesting about this story is that this isn't the first time that someone within this region has detailed this, with many others coming forward and saying that they've seen strange objects flying above them, making no noise and traveling at incredible speeds, with others saying that they've seen huge rays of light coming down on areas that have been hit by weaponry, and that others have seen large crosses flying across the sky, with many seeing this as a sign during this difficult time. For some, this has given them hope that something higher than us is getting involved and that these objects may actually be here to help us. There's been stories of these crafts getting involved in conflicts, with some military officials even going on record in saying that they've been seen switching off warheads. It's for this reason why many believe that officials are careful when talking about these objects. What they are, though, depends on who you talk to. Some think they belong to us. Others think that due to them being seen changing shape and the speeds of the way they do, they could be something natural, like a type of superintelligent machine, while others think that they belong to something entirely different. Oddly enough, many people in areas like this have reported similar objects, but the thing is, no one is sure what these things are and whose side they're on. As detailed by those who are interested in this topic, they've said that since the 1940s, strange objects have been seen above military installations and also areas that are in the middle of conflict. In February of 1949, the official members of projects that looked into these objects gathered together at a conference held at Los Alamos that included scientists, Joseph Kaplan and Edward Teller. The conference brought together the entire known members of this project and future members alongside military personnel who'd witnessed these strange objects. This in turn meant that these military officials and scientists had gathered a wide range of important data surrounding the events. The conference ended with no general consensus, and the identity of these objects was considered to be unknown and having no natural cause. Although it's impossible to completely ascertain the reason for why these objects are targeting our nuclear testing sites and why they're seen in areas where there's war, some have put forward their own theories, saying that these crafts are either trying to disable a weapon capable of bringing down their crafts or to prevent humanity from destroying itself in a nuclear war. As mentioned, there's been an established link between these crafts and areas of war for decades now. Every time humanity seems to go through a hardship, people close to the area will report seeing these things. In the past 10 years, the stigma around these crafts and the events that had been reported by military officials and others has started some interesting debates. For years, people were mocked when they came forward with their encounters, but now it seems that there's been a shift. Long of the days gone when you hear whispers of drunk people saying that they've seen something strange in the sky. Now you're hearing stories of previous presidents, scientists and researchers and high-up military officials talking about these things, detailing that something truly strange is going on right now, and that we don't have a clue how to stop these things, and this seems to be where the issue comes in and why officials tried to keep these stories quiet for as long as they did. Because going by what many of these researchers and military personnel have said, we don't have a way of stopping these things. And they worry that this could cause panic if they ever let this out. The fact that there could be objects flying around right now that are thousands of years more advanced than our jets could worry people. One person had this to say, "The way I see it is that there's 3 explanations. Either they belong to us, which would mean that we have in our possession crafts that are thousands of years more advanced than any other vehicle we have. Beaver, the natural phenomena, which I think is doubtful after you hear the testimonies of those in the military. Or lastly, these things are coming from an outside source. The thing is, whichever it is, the people have the right to know. We fund these programs that study these objects. And I think it's time we're told the truth about what's going on." End quote. So what do you make these comments by residents in Ukraine? And what do you think these objects are? One of the most bizarre multiple disappearances was originally recorded back in June of 1999, near Wasilla, Alaska, and features the isolated disappearances of two brothers within the same area at different days. The first disappearance was recorded back on the 4th of June, 1999, when a 15-year-old boy by the name of Michael Timothy Palmer went missing. After riding his bike near the edge of Alaskan wilderness after heading home sometime around 4 in the morning. According to Michael's mother, Lisa Palmer, Michael had been with his friends after a graduation party. The official reports describe that on the 3rd of June, 1999, Michael Palmer took a ride with a friend to the graduation party and stayed there for several hours before deciding to head home at around 3 in the morning. Michael and his group of friends decided to ride bicycles back home on a 9-mile journey, and so Michael was provided with his own bike from one of the friends. The group of friends would later claim that as they were riding together, Michael, unfamiliar with the bike, was often left at the end of their traveling line and fell behind the group several times. As the group crossed Pittman Road, they suddenly noticed that Michael is no longer with them. Immediately, the boys pulled over outside of a 7-Eleven, located on the park's highway, to wait for Michael to catch up to them. After standing around and waiting for a while, the group of boys debated on whether they should look for Michael and retrace their steps. However, given the fact that it was almost 4 in the morning, and the majority of the boys were cold and tired, they debated on whether or not it was necessary to search for Michael. Given the fact that the roads they were taking were familiar to the group, and that Michael should have no trouble finding his way home. After the group accepted that Michael most likely took another road home, the boys continued home and decided that they would call Michael in the morning to make sure he was okay. At around 11 in the morning, Michael's mother Lisa Palmer was getting ready for work at Providence Hospital when she started to get worried about Michael. Nervous that Michael was up to no good, as the graduation party was his first ever high school party. Lisa Palmer called the house where the graduation party had occurred to ask about Michael, but was told that Michael had ridden home on a bike summit around 3 in the morning. Now believing that Michael is staying with one of his friends, Lisa called several of his friends who then told Michael's mother about the incident, and that they'd assumed that he'd taken another street home, and that he'd somehow made his way home. Michael's mother then called law enforcement to report that her son was missing and told them everything the group of boys had told her. Without a moment's hesitation, the state troopers rounded up all the boys that had last seen Michael Palmer and questioned them for several hours while separated, as they were under the suspicion that the group of friends had attacked Michael, or an accident had occurred that they were attempting to cover up out of fear of legal consequences. After several hours of intense interrogation, with the boys being subjected to polygraph tests, the state troopers uncovered no new evidence, with the boys seemingly cleared of any wrongdoing. The Alaska state troopers then believed that perhaps Michael's father had been involved with the disappearance in some way, as Michael's mother Lisa had already been separated and remarried around this time, and the father was a less active factor in Michael's life. Michael's older brother Chucky then called his father Charles Palmer, and if he knew anything about Michael's whereabouts, it was then discovered that Michael's father Charles Palmer had been out on a fishing boat for several days, far away from the town, and unable to have been anywhere near the area at the time of the disappearance. Back at square one with next to no leads, the investigators combed over Pittman Road and the surrounding area for any signs of Michael, and it was here that they discovered a bizarre scene. According to the Alaska State Troopers, the bike that Michael had been riding was discovered several hundred yards away from Pittman Road, at the bottom of a small creek bed. Given the fact that the river was not large, they sent in a small diving team to follow the small creek bed, and to look at the bed of the river for any signs of Michael Palmer's belongings, but were unable to find anything except the bicycle sticking out of the water in plain sight. Using the bike as a point for a straight line from where Michael Palmer had last been seen, the Alaska State Trooper continued searching throughout the area and found a pair of shoes that were the same brand and size that Michael Palmer had worn on the morning of his disappearance. According to the reports, the shoes were located around 200 yards from the bike. After inspecting the Converse tennis shoes, the investigators described the shoes as having been wet, a field of small deposits of silt inside that appeared to match the riverbed. Now believing that Michael Palmer had fallen into the river and walked out of the water, dripping wet and cold, they realized that finding Michael would be a life or death situation, given the high chance of Michael succumbing to hypothermia. What appears to be most peculiar, however, is that Michael's shoes appear to have been perfectly placed side by side, as if Michael had taken off his shoes and placed them next to each other on the grass before walking away from the river. The investigators remarked that one of the shoes had been untied, but the other shoe had still been tied, as if the shoe had been kicked off without untying the lasers and then placed upright and adjacent to the other shoe on the ground. Unfortunately, another sign of Michael Palmer had been uncovered, with state troopers believing that Michael could have been the victim of an abduction. Investigators had a hard time explaining why Michael would seemingly take off his shoes if he planned to continue walking in the direction of the woods, which was in the opposite direction of his house. Oddly enough, the disappearance of Michael Palmer would not be the only sudden disappearance to have plagued the Palmer family, as Michael's older brother, Chucky Palmer, would turn up missing roughly 11 years later. 11 years following the Palmer son's disappearance, the family would be visiting the Bald Mountain Woodness area, roughly 17 miles away from where Michael had vanished, for a small family camping trip. Despite the fact that the family was more than 70 miles away from Michael's last known location, the woodlands connected to where they were camping with the same woods Michael had last been seen nearby. According to the report, on the 9th of April, Drucky and the Palmer family were together riding their snowmobiles around the hills of Bob Mountain, staying within a 5-mile radius of their cabin. 30-year-old Chucky had been at the end of the line of snowmobiles that the family had been riding, consistently falling behind for some unknown reason. After a few minutes, similar to Michael's disappearance, for family members and some friends noticed that Chucky was no longer following. Remembering what had happened to Michael, the majority of the family members turned around to go looking for Chucky. This was as soon as they noticed that he'd gone missing, whereas the rest of the group returned back to the cabin, believing that he'd show up shortly. Once the majority of the group reached the cabin, however, fresh snow started to fall, and after an hour of waiting with no sign of Chucky, the group began to worry that the snow would cover his tracks. At around 7:15 a.m. the following day, after spending time looking for Chucky on their own, the Alaska State Troopers were called up to the area to begin a formal search for Chucky, who'd now been deemed as missing. Immediately, state troopers had gone to the area where Chucky had last been seen, and spread out in even searching grid patterns, following pathways in the hopes that Chucky had merely traveled down the wrong way. Investigators later pieced together that rather than continuing the straight path back to their cabin, Chucky had taken a turn that led eastward to the east side of the Bald Mountain. Following this eastern path, the investigators found Chucky's snowmobile, roughly 12 miles past the cabin on the wrong side of the mountain, with no sign of Chucky anywhere nearby. After spending several hours attempting to look for Chucky, a heavy snowstorm fell in the area, covering their paths, which made search and rescue difficult for the troopers. After some time, the rescue efforts were postponed until conditions improved. By the following Monday, roughly 24 hours later, the Fire Department, Alaska State Troopers, several dozen volunteers, and 2 helicopters conducted a thorough search of the nearby area, but were unable to find any signs of Chucky. Although some people believe that Chucky may have tried to take his life, the family and friends swear that Chucky was in a positive mindset. Even more peculiar, when the fire department chief was interviewed almost a year later, on the 4th of May 2011, he'd made the comment to the KTNA that he believed that a far more terrible theory was responsible for Chucky's disappearance. Fire Chief Ken Farnier, who'd been in the area and involved in the search and rescue of Chucky, and had known about his younger brother's bizarre disappearance, claimed that he spent 4 days out in the Bald Mountain wilderness and found evidence that supports the theory that Chucky had been abducted by advanced lifeforms. He'd gone on record several times saying the following: "I stand by my original alien abduction theory, because I cannot come up with any other explanation." Jockey would leave behind a wife and 3 daughters. To this day, no evidence of belongings has been uncovered surrounding the 2 Palmer brothers and the mysterious disappearances. So what do you make of these disappearances? In 1983, when Gary McKinnon was just 17 years old, he went to his local cinema in North London to see a new movie called War Games. In the movie, a computer genius hacks into a Pentagon network. The movie had a big impression on Gary, and it got him thinking maybe he could be a hacker too. His passion for hacking was only ever going to lead him in one direction. Between February 2001 and March 2002, Gary McKinnon was able to hack into U.S. computer networks, where he allegedly uncovered a whole host of information that would land him in deep water, facing possible extradition to the United States. McKinnon claimed he'd managed to gain access to NASA websites, and in an interview with Rich Planet TV, claimed to have found information relating to advanced flying aircrafts. He claimed to have seen an Excel sheet which had the ranks and names of unknown people, as well as another sheet which had tabs for material transfers between shims. He tried to do some research on the names of the shims, around 8 to 10 in total, but was unable to find any more information relating to any of them. At the end of February 2022, he went on Reddit and did and asked me anything. This is where members of Reddit can reach out and ask questions. He said the following: "Hi, I'm Gary McKinnon. I'll make this brief, but there are some things I feel it's important to point out, so you know where I'm coming from. Apologies for not doing a live video response. I have a couple of commercial projects on the go that prohibit me from doing audio video in relation to my story. And thanks to Reddit for inviting me to do this AMA. I was arrested in March 2002 for hacking into various government and military networks in America, looking for evidence of mysterious flying aircrafts and free energy. It wasn't a clever hack. No fragmented packets to bypass firewalls of any kind or the glossy stuff. I had a specific intention, and like any good system administrator, which I was at the time, I wanted a simple process that would catch basic weaknesses, sometimes network-wide, with a simple script and a little creativity. It was cracking more than hacking. Like any sysadmin knows, the laziest solution is often the best. In my effort to find solid proof that the government and military knew about these crafts, I followed information found in a book by the Disclosure Project run by Stephen Greer. In the book, Donna Hare, who was a NASA launch photographic specialist, said that in Building 8 of Johnson Space Center, there was a lab set aside for airbrushing out mysterious flying aircrafts, and this was from high-resolution satellite imagery. The tool I wrote scanned for local administrator accounts on Windows PCs. It was written in Perl, and scanned a Class B in 8 minutes, the low latency due to me running the scan on an already compromised machine on the same or another government military network. I found Building 8 by reading the comments section of the PC via the command console. These fields are used for auditing, and luckily NASA filled them all in, so I knew which PCs were in Building 8. There weren't many machines in Building 8, but one of the first I looked at had folders called raw and processed, or raw and cleaned or filtered. The images averaged around 250 megabytes and would have taken a long time at 5 minutes per megabyte on a 56K modem. So having remote control of the PC via a program called Remotely Anyway, I decided to view it live on the desktop, which was risky since they work odd hours at NASA. The image was coming down very slowly via the Java-based Remotely Anywhere program, so I cut the color to 4-bit, 16 colors and shades, and the lowest resolution, which was 640 by 480, I think. It may have even been 320 by 240. The image slowly filled the screen, and all I could see was blackness, superimposed upon which was a blue-white planet. Superimposed on that was a tubular form that was metallic white and had domes around its central circumference and at its ends. This thing had no rivets or seams and looked futuristic, though of course with the low resolution and number of shades in the image detail was lacking. This was my eureka moment. Donna Hare's lab was still in existence. I was waiting for this image too and was planning on the fastest way to get all of the other images to me. And right when I was making my plans, I saw the mouse cursor move to the bottom right of the screen. Right-click the network icon and choose Disconnect. I'd been caught and disconnected, missing my chance to grab even a single image. I never did any intentional damage or accidental. As far as I know, I'm not a vandal. But I did leave stupid messages about disrupting their sense of security. My family and I then fought my possible extradition to America for 10 years, finally winning the case in 2012. I know this is an odd story and not too widely publicized in America at the time, so I apologize that there's nothing new, though hopefully interesting questions will result in interesting answers. Let me tell you what happened to me in 2006, the only odd men in black possibly kind of thing that happened to me, apart from being followed by the same van for 2 hours one time across England. I lived in a bed seat at the time, being unemployed due to my ongoing case, which is one room and a shared house. I was on the first floor, one story up if you're American. My lady and I had gone to my bed on my fold-out sofa. I think we fell asleep around midnight. I woke up out of a really deep sleep, so I'm thinking it must have been around 2 or 3. I was woken up by a really sharp pain in my left heel. So sharp that I jolted awake and reached down to my foot to see what it was, whereupon I was forced to sleep again. It was like going under general anesthetic, uncomfortable and unwilling. So I went from painful shock to instant sleep. In the morning, the first thing I thought was the pain in my heel. I looked at my foot and it turned out I'd gone to bed with my sock on. And there were 2 holes in the sock on my heel. I removed the sock and found 2 perfectly round holes in my heel, each around 5 millimeters in diameter, and one with a perfectly circular flap of skin still hanging from it, like someone had done me with a miniature paper hole punch. I can't explain to this day and can only assume it's a chimp. I've had tri-field meters on it, I've had a super-sensitive magnetometer that showed nothing, but 2 lumps did grow on the hill in the months following the event, and they have now moved around to the inside of the fund. So what do you guys make of Gary's story? Doesn't love to learn more about the universe. Often the most amazing or impactful discoveries are made while searching for something else entirely. There are mysteries all around us, and we are fascinated by what we cannot understand. So today, we are dedicated to bringing you the most exciting and brain-stimulating stories. So without further ado, here is 3 interesting discoveries. 2 strange blobs of X-ray energy are swirling out of the galaxy's center. Giant floating blobs are not the first thing that comes to mind when thinking about space, but scientists seem to be pondering a lot recently. Specifically, they are trying to learn more about 2 strange orbs at the heart of the Milky Way. But before we get into that, we need to first learn a bit about our galaxy's history. Over millions of years in the past, our galaxy was host to a gigantic explosion. This giant expulsion of energy is believed to have sent 2 identical shock waves across space itself. These 2 waves shot all the way over the Milky Way, heating up massive amounts of space material as they did so. It is this event that has caused 2 giant orbs of hot gamma rays floating in space. Energized by the waves from millions of years ago, these blobs are still visible to us today. The blobs are known as the Fermi bubbles and stretch nearly half the width of the Milky Way. One of the bubbles hovers a massive 25,000 light-years over the Milky Way's disk, and the other does the same beneath it. They were first discovered in 2010, but up until recently we have known relatively little about them. Continued research has only brought up more questions about the Fermi bubbles. Structures within the bubbles, such as chimneys of plasma and balloons of radio energy, have been spotted using wavelength technology. One of the latest discoveries of other Fermi bubble-like structures are the E-Recita bubbles. These structures are only visible through X-rays. They are much colder than the Fermi bubbles, but they are nearly the same size, measuring about 45,000 light-years in length. They also share the same displacement pattern as the Fermi bubbles, with them towering above and below the galaxy in a specific shape. Because of their similarities, it is believed that the Fermi and E-Recita bubbles share a common originator and even a physical relationship. It is likely they both emerged from the huge explosion mentioned earlier. But what astronomers are still questioning is what caused the explosion in the first place. One theory is that it may have been something to do with an energetic outburst by the Milky Way's giant black hole Sagittarius Aster. Scientists discover rare asteroid that will follow Earth in orbit for the next 4,000 years. There are millions, if not billions, of asteroids potentially whizzing around in space. Scientists who discover these traveling lumps of rock have plenty of examples to study and learn from. But it is not every day that something truly special shows up. In this case, it is what's known as an Earth Trojan asteroid, which is a small piece of space rock that has the same orbit as Earth. A study only recently published announced that researchers had proven the asteroid's existence and also stated that the rock will be following Earth's orbit for at least another several thousand years. A team of astronomers from the Institute of Cosmos Sciences of the University of Barcelona proudly declared their discovery of 2020 XL5, the second Earth Trojan ever confirmed, after 10 years of tireless searching. 2020 XL5 is believed to be around 0.7 miles in diameter. For context, the first Earth Trojan 2010 TK7 was 0.2 miles in diameter. The size is important in Earth Trojan asteroids as the sweet spot allows the rock to balance within Earth's orbit around the Sun. Trojan asteroids are nothing new. For decades, we have been aware of Trojans on Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune. Though Earth ones have proven to be more elusive, there have been many previous attempts to find Earth Trojans. Tony Santana Ross, one of the authors of the new publication, said to press, "All the dedicated efforts had so far failed to discover any new members of this population. Spotting Earth Trojans is surprisingly difficult. Because of their distance to the Sun, the window of opportunity to spot them is very small. It is only around sunrise that we can try to catch a glimpse of them. However, scientists have got around this by utilizing huge telescopes in Arizona and Cerro Pacon in Chile to photograph the asteroids. Scientists are interested in Trojans mostly due to their age, as many of them were around during the earliest stages of the solar system. They are effectively time captures of the conditions for that time. In fact, NASA's Lucy mission, which launched in October 2021, is set to visit 8 different Trojan asteroids in the next 12 years. University of Utah discover new black hole. Researchers from the University of Utah have recently been able to confirm the existence of intermediate mass black holes. These bodies have been sought after for a long time and are key in understanding the formation of galaxies. Speaking of the discovery, Anil Seth, a co-author of the discovery and professor of physics, said, "This is an important step in understanding the process of galaxy assembly. The process of how we got from the Big Bang to having a sun with a planet around it in a galaxy like the Milky Way. We're seeing the fossils of that type of assembly here, and that's what makes it exciting." The discovered black hole is named B023G078, and it's shown researchers more about what happens when two galaxies collide. The black hole is what scientists call a stripped nuclei. This is created when a smaller galaxy is swallowed by a larger one. The smaller galaxy becomes very dense and starts to orbit the bigger one. The discovery has helped researchers understand the key relationship between black holes and stars and their responsibilities in galaxy formation. There are 2 different types of black holes that we know about in the universe. There's the ones that are formed when stars blow up at supernovae and leave behind a mass similar to the mass of our sun. Then there's these really massive black holes we find at the centers of galaxies, and they're typically more than 1,000,000 times the mass of the sun, explained Seth. The most exciting result is that this black hole is in the gap between them. And that is most likely telling us that it was the center of a galaxy, which is also shown because of the wide variations of elements within the star cluster, Seth added. The hole was discovered in the galaxy Andromeda, over 2.5 million light-years away, with data gleaned from the Hubble Space Telescope and the Gemini Observatory at Mauna Kea in Hawaii. As well as having 8.1-meter diameter mirrors, the Gemini Observatory Telescope also has what is known as laser guide star adaptive optics. This technology corrects for any interference caused by the atmosphere. The discovery has been over 10 years in the making, as co-author Seth originally submitted a proposal to search for the black hole around 2012. It took 4 years just to have the submission approved, and roughly another 6 for any results to be found. It just goes to show that traveling across space is not the only slow process. Studying it takes a lot of time too. But what do you make of these recent discoveries? There are mysteries all around us, and we are fascinated by what we cannot understand. Inexplicable phenomena are discovered every day, keeping our curiosity piqued and the prospect of actually knowing the world around us a foreign concept. So today, we'll be exploring 3 fascinating discoveries which very easily could have gone unnoticed, but luckily were discovered just in time. Japanese island disappears without anyone noticing. What if we told you that a couple of years ago Japan lost some of its land, and by extension their territorial waters too? With the current political turmoil, you may think we mean it was invaded, but no. Back in 2018, one of their islands close to Russia somehow disappeared without anyone noticing for some time. Asambi Hanakita, Kojima, named by their government back in 2014, was one of their 158 remote, unpopulated islands, and no one is thought to have disappeared along with it. The disappearance does have political implications, though. With the newfound absence of their island territory, there is now a larger gap between Russia and Japan's respective territories. Russia also has their own nearby islands close to their mainland. Coming back to the actual manner in which this island was lost, if it was not invaded, and it was not swept away by a hurricane like Hawaii's East Island. In fact, the existence of the island altogether has been brought into question given this recent discovery. This is because the last time that the island was formally surveyed was back in 1978 by the Japanese government. It was then marked as an underwater reef, and so fishermen, for example, would avoid the area because of its status on the maps. From this, local coast guards guess that winds and drift ice probably eroded what was left of the island over time, potentially even over the course of several decades, it is thought. So how did people eventually notice that this island had disappeared? Well, it seems as though locals on a nearby Japanese island could well have never noticed the gradual disappearance. Rather coincidentally, though, author Hiroshi Shimizu had been researching nearby hidden islands to use in his next book, and on his travels discovered that Isenbai Hiniki Takajima was no longer there. Upon not finding the island, a fisheries cooperative was able to confirm for him that it was gone. So Coast Guards were informed and planned to follow up and check that this was indeed the case. A disappearing island is absolutely fascinating, especially how it happened. In this case, Solar Orbiter spacecraft captures huge eruption on the sun. Huge is perhaps an understatement here. The eruption caught by the Solar Orbiter's extreme ultraviolet imager is in fact the largest solar prominent eruption ever observed in a single image, which also contains the sun in its entirety. Jetting out millions of miles into space from the sun's surface, it was lucky that the ejection was not aimed in the direction of our Earth. An absolute milestone observation in space, and for the mission, this rare image is expected to provide a lot of data surrounding solar activities for the joint NASA-European team behind the mission. While other spacecrafts have caught solar prominences on camera before, the magnitude of the ejection caught has either been smaller than this one, or their positioning or distance has meant that the sun's disk was not fully featured in the image, as it was in this case. Solar prominences are complex phenomena. According to a statement made by the European Space Agency, they can be described as large structures of tangled magnetic field lines that keep dense concentrations of solar plasma suspended above the sun's surface, sometimes taking the form of arching loops. Additionally, they are also often associated with coronal mass ejections, which refers to eruptions of charged particles occasionally emitted by the sun. Coronal mass ejections are highly disruptive to us here on Earth, though, as they interfere with technologies such as satellites, power lines, and various other similar infrastructures. The Solar Orbiter's next bypass of the sun takes place on the 26th of March, and it is expected to pass the sun with even closer proximity than last time, opening up many opportunities for new, remarkable data to be sourced. Astronomers spot remains of long-lost galaxy eaten by the Milky Way. It's no secret that in the Milky Way's long and prosperous history, It has demolished or absorbed few other galaxies along the way. However, astronomers are now thinking that the number of galaxies which fell victim to the Milky Way is much higher than they originally thought. Spacecraft Gaia uncovered remains of a cosmic collision which is thought to have occurred 8 to 10 billion years ago. The uncovering of this ancient feat, which happened in our Milky Way, has shed light on a previously unknown galaxy, now nicknamed Pontus, which astronomers have concluded must have been absorbed by the Milky Way, helping to shape and form our own galaxy. After analyzing this data from Gaia, the European Space Agency have reported that billions of years ago, Pontus must have strayed a bit too close to our galaxy, getting caught by the Milky Way's gravitational pull. The strong forces would have pulled Pontus apart. The scattering of a foreign galaxy's stars in such a case can help provide insight into how fast this mangling process occurred, as well as help the phenomenon to be recognized within galaxies billions of years later as it has today. In this way, the family tree of the Milky Way can be deciphered if you break the galaxy down into the smaller galaxies which it once absorbed, making it what with Gaia's mission to chart the sky in 3D more accurately than ever before, she has seemingly made a lot of progress since her launch in 2013. Besides discovering Pontus, scientists have also discovered what they believe to be 5 other distinct merging groups, as well as a possible 6th, buried within the masses of data Gaia provides them with. It is also thought that most of these other events occurred around a similar time to Pontus, making them all incredibly ancient and awesomely interesting. Fascinating. With a wealth of information still clearly unbeknownst to us, it will be interesting to see what other InSight spacecrafts like Gaia, as well as newer endeavors, can uncover in coming years. It's probably impossible to ever know the cosmos completely as humans. However, we certainly are making leaps and bounds almost every day, it seems. Understanding aspects about the cosmos around us will always be mysterious in our understanding of our place in this world. Similarly, understanding the ongoing evolution of our own planet further adds to intrigue. There is clearly so much to learn. What do you make of these curious discoveries? Yellowstone National Park is one of the most incredible places you can visit. Not only is it home to breathtaking views, a supervolcano that can end modern civilization as we know it, but it also has a large number of animal species. All of this has made it one of the most popular national parks in the United States, with it receiving 4.4 million visits in 2021, a million more than in 2020. Working in a national park, though, isn't always what it's cracked up to be. In fact, many of these workers are on call-outs, meaning that if something happens within or close to these parks, they'll likely be the first responders. This happened last year when a backcountry guide passed away just outside of Yellowstone. Charles Mock was 40 years old at the time of his passing. He lived in the Parkway Gate community of West Yellowstone, an area known for the huge Old Faithful geyser. It was here that he decided to head out and do a little fishing. However, he would soon realize that he wasn't alone, and during his trip he was being stalked. Heading down to Madison River several miles north of West Yellowstone, he found the perfect place to fish. A county sheriff's office spokesman announced that Charles Mock was in the wrong area at the wrong time, as mere feet away from him was a large male bear. The bear weighed over 400 pounds and soon charged a child. He managed to fight off the bear as best as he could and was even able to phone 911 for assistance. It took park rangers over 50 minutes to find Charles, by which point it was reported that he was in a rough place. He was transported via snowmobile to an ambulance. Unfortunately, the sheriff's office soon announced that he'd passed away from his injuries. This bear was particularly aggressive, with those who went into the area saying that it was stalking childs and that it was super protective of the nearby area. It was then that the group discovered a moose carcass 40 meters from where the attack took place, and this led investigators to say that it was likely that the bear was protecting his meal. The bear was also taken out when it then charged the workers who were trying to investigate what happened. It was after this that they discovered that the bear ate another bear. This was after testing was carried out on what the bear had recently eaten. Charles was a guard for a company that provided snowmobile rentals and tours in Yellowstone National Park. Charles had done everything he could during this encounter, as officials discovered that it used bear spray in order to deter the animal from attacking. Some have theorized that the bear only attacked because of a moose being in the area, with them saying that the situation could have been different if the moose wasn't there. A spokesperson said the areas around Yellowstone are home to over 700 bears, and that attacks on humans are quite rare, but have only increased in recent years as bears have moved into more populated areas. Since 2010, Yellowstone grizzly bears have taken the lives of 8 people, with 3 losing their lives within Yellowstone. If you've ever frequented a national park, you probably associate them with good memories by spending days by a lake, or gone camping with friends or family, hiked through the beautiful and enchanting trails and watched the sunset at the end of a long day. Of all the national parks that have encountered unusual activity, Yellowstone National Park has caught tremendous media attention, and this is in regards to the sounds that have been heard there. This mystery is one that has had detectives puzzled and continues to confuse all of those who visit Yellowstone. The eerie sounds of Yellowstone National Park have been more specifically heard by Yellowstone Lake, and this has been happening since the 1970s. Various terms have been used to describe the sounds, but no one is able to settle on a specific description. Some visitors have explained the sound in many ways, such as a swarm of bees, crashing of metal poles, organ sounds, and much more. Some have even said it's as if a loud trumpet sound is coming from the sky, comparing it to similar sounds that have been heard across the world. These sounds have been more commonly known as lake music, since we can't seem to place a finger on what the sounds actually are. Many theories have been thrown around, one of which is the possibility of a mild earthquake, and another being wild pools over as being the culprit of these sounds. Unfortunately, experts have yet to find an explanation for these sounds. Although they're heard less frequently, visitors still hear this lake music every so often, and struggle to understand where they come from. Another theory surrounds the deaths that have occurred at Yellowstone. With many thermal geysers and hot springs, it's expected that a few fatalities would ensue. Over the years, many people have lost their lives at Yellowstone, but surprisingly, most deaths took place at Yellowstone Lake. Since 1894, over 40 people have passed away in the lake due to capsizing kayaks and canoes. Many have since speculated about the strange sounds and relations to the passings that have took place. Whether these connections hold any ground is something that we can't be sure of. Albeit knowing many people lost their lives in the lake, make the sounds coming from the Yellowstone National Park even more eerie. So what do you make of these Yellowstone Park discoveries and announcements? Each year, thousands of people record mysterious videos, leaving us with more questions than answers. One interesting video was just recorded above Texas. The individual who took the footage, Miriam Bozo, sent out a post asking if anyone had seen anything strange above Houston. The video was taken 2 days ago on the 3rd of March, 2022, and it left many people confused as to what she had captured. Interestingly, it wasn't long before other people came forward in detail that they'd seen something similar, with one person saying that they were flying into Houston when they saw something stationary in the sky, saying that they weren't able to take any videos due to how fast they were moving, but what they saw much is what Miriam had captured. Miriam described that the object stayed stationary in the sky for over 15 minutes, detailing that the object had no lights on it, didn't appear to match the nearby clouds, and also wasn't anything like wildlife. Some suggested that it could have been something like a flock of birds that were passing through the area, but again most agree that the video doesn't match any type of wildlife, purely because the object in the video doesn't appear to move. Interestingly, once the post started to gain traction, more and more people who live in Texas started to give their opinions, with many of them saying that last year similar-looking objects were seen in the sky that matched this one, having no lights, making no noise, and also didn't appear to move. For years now, residents across the United States have been seeing strange-looking objects. Many of these residents have reported that large black triangles are on the increase, with the National Institute for Discovery Science, also known as NINDS, saying that these black triangles are being reported by more and more residents every single year across the U.S. In their study, they said the following: the United States is currently experiencing a wave of flying triangle sightings that may have intensified in the 1990s, especially towards the latter part of the 1990s. The wave continues. The flying triangles are being openly deployed over and near population centers, including in the vicinity of major interstate highways. Since early sightings, many have put forward their own theories for what these things are, who owns them, and where they're coming from. Some have said that these triangles could be part of the Aurora project. For those unaware, Aurora is said to be a top-secret stealth aircraft that was first manufactured during the mid-1980s, with aviation researchers saying that the program has run into the modern day. In 2006, Black Project watcher and aviation writer Bill Sweetman said the following about the project: "Does Aurora exist? Years of pursuit have led me to believe that yes, Aurora is most likely in active development, spurred on by recent advances that have allowed technology to catch up with the ambition that launched the program a generation ago." Although some have said that these crafts belong to one project, which is said to be the Aurora, others have said that the black triangles in the Aurora crafts are actually different, saying that there's some key differences. Some aviation researchers have said that eyewitnesses who have seen the alleged Aurora planes report they give off sonic booms, while eyewitnesses that have watched the black triangles have never deterred them giving off sonic booms. These black triangles are said to make no noise at all, and the majority of witnesses only see them because they happen to be looking up at the sky at the right time, noting that no noise was present during the encounter. Pilots have even come forward with their encounters with these mysterious black triangles, saying that there's a big difference between Black Project aircrafts in these strange triangles. One pilot estimated that one of these crafts flew past him, and it was easily going at speeds exceeding 2,500 miles per hour. One of the issues when it comes to these black triangles is that we know they're real, as thousands of people from all around the world have come forward with their sightings and photographs. The problem that people have is that we don't know who owns them. They've been seen in pretty much every country across the world, and yet we're no closer to understanding who is really creating these hybrid advanced aircrafts. Various questions remain. How are these crafts able to hover motionless in the sky without making a sound? How can they go from a standstill to thousands of miles per hour within a few seconds? Why does no one seem to know anything about them? Another mystery surrounding these crafts is that they're able to seemingly sneak into restricted airspace, causing some to question if these actually belong to the military. Its jets have been video chasing these crafts out of restricted airspace. So what do you make of this interesting video? And what do you think this object is? Over the last 100 years or so, people have reported encountering mysterious creatures. Although the majority of these have been explained, there are some that are still shrouded in mystery. So today, ES creatures. Freiburg Shriek, referred to as the Freiburg Shriek, a strange encounter with a subterranean creature, has left many wondering if the possible sighting is related to that of other creatures and an impending disaster. The creature was spotted by more than 21 different individuals, of whom worked as miners at an old mine located in the town of Freiburg, Germany. On the 10th of September, back in 1978, these miners were going about their day as usual. They were the first group of miners to enter the mine every morning and work their shifts until late that evening, a schedule that was rather routine by this point in time. Though they would work these mines every single day and had worked this very same mine only the day prior, there would be a strange creature inhabiting the area near the entrance of the tunnel that they would all claim to have seen. The creature was described as being a tall, dark figure with large wings on its back, standing at the entrance to the mine. After all the miners stared at the creature for a while, frightened by its appearance, the creature opened up its wings and let out a piercing sound. Some described the sound as being like 50 people screaming, whereas others claimed it more closely resembled the sound generated by a train in peril trying to brake at the sight of a twisted rail. The creature then went deeper inside the mine and could not be seen by the miners. After this encounter, The workers decided that they would delay mining for a few more hours by working on outside jobs before entering the mine, as they were attempting to calm themselves while trying to figure out what had just occurred. As they were working, a loud explosion occurred within the mine itself, causing a collapse of certain chambers and closing off areas of the mine that would later be excavated to continue work. This has led many to believe that the creature could have been that of the Mothman given the description of the creature, and that its actions were to prevent a tragedy from occurring by saving the lives of the miners. Despite this, the majority of the workers would go on to suffer from self-proclaimed mental issues, recurring nightmares and visions. Additionally, 6 of the miners would eventually have been found dead in their sleep, having perished suddenly with no real explanation. Sightings of the Zimbabwe merfolk. Unlike the cute animated portrayals of the mythical creature, the mermaids of Zimbabwe have been a recurring problem for those living nearby large waterways in the country, as the humanoid creatures have reportedly been at the center of a variety of random attacks, terrifying vandalism and delays in construction efforts. Back in 2012, while working on the Gakwe and Osborne dams, the Zimbabwe construction company claimed that nearly every employee had left the construction site in fear for their lives after having been attacked by a strange humanoid river monster known as the Mambu Muntu. It was believed that the Mambu Muntu used the rivers as natural outlets to the ocean and that they had become terribly angered by the construction efforts. Debates were made on whether or not construction should continue before a full report on the environmental impact was made. However, under pressure of contracts and health standards, construction continued regardless. This forced the local council to hire entirely new workers from out of the country to work on the dam, as the locals refused to continue working on the construction of the project due to their superstitions. Oddly enough, after several weeks, even the foreign workers resigned after claiming to have been attacked by humanoid sea creatures and regarded the entire river as being cursed. In an effort to appease these strange creatures, the council was forced to perform cleansing rituals and make offerings to the creatures before construction began again with no further issues. Although most do not make the connection, Zambia, the closest country to Zimbabwe, built the Kariba Dam in the same waterways within their borders. The project was determined to be a necessity in the region as the water from the river would not only be able to power all of the electrical requirements for that region, but it would also prove to be a major work program that would allow a number of locals to generate income while working on the projects to be used to help spur the local economy of the region. Unfortunately, many of the religious figures already suffering under the oppressive hand of the government felt that the construction of the dam was a violation of the principles of their god known as Nyaminyami. Nyaminyami was, more specifically, the god of the river Zambezi and was believed to reside within the river. Religious figures argued that if the dam was built, then Nyamhinyami would curse them for messing with the natural ecosystem and bring on a terrible tragedy, urging the locals to defy the government and refuse construction. Despite this sentiment from the religious leaders, many of the locals would still go on to work on the construction of the dam, assisting in the government's tactic to force the native Bedona people to move from their homes and live elsewhere. Almost as if directly predicted by the religious leaders, shortly after the Padang people were moved, a devastating flood tore through the region, and due to the half-construction of the dam blocking the only direction for water to flow, it led to the entire dam becoming destroyed, killing every single worker that was working on the construction of the project. Oddly enough, however, not a single body has been recovered. Given the fact that the majority of those who died were locals, this led to many of the relatives begging the religious leaders to help lift the curse and allow the dam to be constructed without any future problems. Religious leaders then gave instructions to the people for the only way that the curse would be lifted. They must sacrifice a calf and offer it to the river. For some inexplicable reason, after the ceremony was completed, the bodies of the workers appeared where the calf was placed in the river, allowing the souls to finally be put to rest. The Chicago Willis Tower sighting. Back in 2017, on the 24th of July at approximately 5:10 p.m., several eyewitnesses claimed to have seen a large insectoid creature flying and landing on the Chicago Willis Tower. Eyewitnesses had quickly called a man by the name of Lon Strickler, of whom runs a website known as Phantoms and Monsters, and alerted him to their sighting of the strange creature, trying to figure out what it could have been. The eyewitnesses described the creature as being roughly 6 feet in height and perched atop the Chicago Willis Tower, with a wingspan of roughly 8 feet and jagged wings similar to that of a moth. The body of the creature was described as being similar in design to that of a praying mantis with a dark green hue and legs that seemed to be human-like. Shortly after being spotted by eyewitnesses, the creature jumped from the tower and began flying away. The eyewitnesses then claimed that as the creature was flying away, it began changing shape as if it were shape-shifting into a different form into something that was described as being a human insect and bird hybrid. According to Lon Strickler, the owner of the Phantoms and Monsters website, this creature has been sighted more than 22 times within 2017 alone, believing many to hold the sentiment that the creature is residing within Chicago as more and more sightings every year seem to hold similar descriptions of this human insect bird hybrid. But what do you make of these three strange creatures?